All right, everyone. Over the last few years, we've seen an awful lot of screwy revisionist propaganda with regards to archaeology. Mostly, it's aimed at painting a different picture of the development of the European peoples over time, in the last 10,000, 20,000 years, than is realistic. And this is an example of it. Now, you got to understand that in most cases, these studies, they show something that's clearly falsifiable or even outright bullshit, but it's presented to the public as a legitimate theory. It's not to impact the minds of people within science in the sense of actually having a study that says what you're in your write-up, you're claiming that it says. It's more about swaying public opinion, knowing that public opinion informs the next generation of people who will get into science, thus predisposing them to certain outcomes and theories over the course of the next 10, 20 years that are woke, effectively. For instance, a few years ago, you remember when they found that Viking grave where they had a sword buried with a female, and they said, well, this is evidence that this strong, empowered woman was, obviously she was a warrior or something, so women were fighting in battle. It is easily just as likely to interpret it as, hey, she wanted to be buried with her dead husband's sword. Hey, this is an honorary sword. She wasn't in battle. She's being buried with this as a symbol of her being a shield maiden or something like that. It's a symbol of her rearing some great warrior, or her son became the greatest of the Vikings of his tribe or something. There are a million ways to interpret it, but the interpretation that they go with and they artificially amplify in the legacy media, especially in some of these science papers, is totally different. When they found that ring up in a Viking burial, this was 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and it was inscribed in Islamic script, in Arabic, and appears to have come from the Middle East. They interpreted it as, hey, the Vikings were diverse. Some of these people were practicing Islam. Reasonable people looked at what is generally known about these cultures and said, that's probably not the case. It's more likely that one of them was raiding Byzantium at the time or something. They penetrated deep into Europe, and they killed someone and they took their ring. They had no clue what it read or anything like that. They just said, hey, cool ring. Cuts their finger off and takes it, because Vikings were not known for asking permission to borrow things very often. That would be the more sane way of interpreting it, but for a considerable length of time I kept seeing posted by people all over the net Islamic Vikings or things like, or black Vikings. Yes, there were black people in Scandinavia. Many of them were slaves at the time. They did delve into such things, many of which would have been female. They would have been used as courtesans, effectively, as courtiers. Now, we've got something else. Link in the description, archived, of course. Now they're trying to refine Otzi the Iceman. This was a remain from many thousands of years ago, European individual, possibly a chieftain, probably a person of some degree of wealth and nobility, had a copper axe with him, so would have been a fairly expensive item. Appears to have been reasonably well equipped, although he had a variety of health issues according to new tests. I'll be talking about that in a second. Anyway, they found him stuck halfway in and halfway out of a glacier. The mummy is very well intact, although for a while, I remember back when I was a kid, they were worried about mold taking hold. Had to scrub the body and all sorts of crazy shit. I think they basically got him in a refrigerator. Personally, I think that they should just give him a proper burial, as is generally afforded to a person. I find it a little bit weird that we dig people out of the snow or out of the earth, where they've clearly been interred or died or something. It's like, they're dead, kind of desecrating their remains. Once you're done with your studies and taking samples and stuff, maybe put them in the ground, give them a proper tribal burial or something. I mean, there are stone cairns up there in Tyrol, in proximity to Otzi the Iceman, one of which may be from his same tribe. Why not bury him at the foot of that or something like that? Anyway, they've looked into more of his DNA. They got better samples. The first samples they had were contaminated over time. And they managed to deduce that he was lactose intolerant, and so probably didn't come from Norway, in other words. They figured out his unique haplogroup, etc. And what they determined, if you read this particular article, you will say, oh, well, he might have been from North Africa or something. The article simply says he was darker than originally expected, so he wasn't like Germanic. What they mean, if you read the actual study, and this is Science News, so supposedly there's some rigor involved in their reporting to an audience of highbrow intellectual individuals, like college kids and shit. If you read the article, it insinuates that he was from sub-Saharan Africa or Arabia or something. If you read the study and you look at the actual genetic grouping, which is completely omitted as far as what that grouping means in the actual abstract write-up of the legacy media site known as Science News, you find out that it's a group that's common to places like Corsica. We're talking about southern France or northern Italy, somewhere around that general region, maybe Tuscany. So this individual would have been darker, but in the context of you're darker than the average albino from Iceland. You're clearly not Northern Germanic. You're clearly Southern European, but you're white. And then they make the fantastical claim, well, those things didn't appear until much, much later in the record of Europe. No, I don't think so. I think that there were people who were blonde-haired and blue-eyed actually far further back than this in Northern Europe. It would make genetic sense. It would make evolutionary sense. It would follow the evidence that we've already gotten. Basically, this was a debate over which side of the Alps he came from. Did he come wandering south from Germany and therefore was, Northern European? Or did he wander up from parts south and he was Southern European? Nobody makes the claim in the study that any of the evidence shows anything other than this being a fully European individual, probably without any foreign admixture for the prior 50,000 or so years. Nobody makes that claim except the insinuated claim when you read the actual abstract given to the public. Otzi the Iceman is a fairly popular topic, especially if you happen to be into archaeology, history, etc. If you just read that, though, and most people will, they're not going to do what I did and actually go to the linked study and read through the abstract there, you'll find an entirely different reality is being presented from the genuine one. Otzi the Iceman was European. He doesn't represent anything specifically distinctly out of place or out of time other than a few quirks as far as the genetics go. For instance, one group could have been interpreted as coming from the Anatolian region. Again, the people that you're talking about are a diaspora that were broadly European in diaspora. It seems like these people bent back up north, went to the Caspian region based on there's a totem that they found in a swamp that's, I think, 14,000 years old up in Russia, clearly carved by people who were part of a Eurasian group mainly, possibly Indo-Aryan, not 100% sure. It's one of the oldest sculptures of an organic compound known to man. Other than cave paintings and rock cairns, you don't have really anything predating that. There's not a whole lot of competition. I think it was 14,000 years. Showing that they were making human figures, etc., with, not necessarily accuracy, but definitely artistic stylization by that time. I think it's also like 14 feet tall or something. Crazy sculpture. It looks kind of dour. It looks very, very solemn, actually. Definitely Eurasian in creation. Otzi was European. But read the article, and your snap judgment will be, oh, he was darker than expected, so he came up from Africa or something. They omit that entirely. When they talk about the new genetic testing, they don't even tell you where the haplogroup tends to come from. It is most common in Corsica, which is off the coast of southern France. He's a southern European diaspora. He probably would be alpinoid in appearance more than anything else. That's about all. Peace out.